Look, if you're planning on hiking the Blue Ridge or spending any time in the deep pockets of the Appalachians, there is one rule the locals don't tell the tourists. Not because they're being mean, but because talking about it makes it real. If you're deep in a holler and you hear a whistle, sharp, clear, and melodic, you do not, under any circumstances, whistle back. You keep your head down, you keep your breath shallow, and you keep moving. Because in these woods, a whistle isn't a greeting. It's an invitation for something to follow you home. My name is Miller. I've lived in these mountains for 42 years, 30 of those spent working as a heavy equipment operator for timber crews. I've seen bears, I've seen mountain lions, and I've seen the way the mist crawls up the ridges like it's got a mind of its own. I'm not some city kid who gets spooked by an owl. I know the sounds of these woods better than the sound of my own wife's voice. But what happened last October? It's the reason I don't go past the porch light after 6,000 LPM anymore. It was a Tuesday, right around the tail end of the season. I was working a site about 6 miles deep into a private tract of timber near the Tennessee border. I was operating a Cat 5025D skidder. That's a massive piece of machinery, weighs about 45,000 pounds. The engine has this specific rhythmic thrum that usually drowns out the world. I was clearing a landing for the log trucks, working the winch, and trying to ignore the way the temperature had plummeted 20 degrees in less than an hour. Around 4:45 p.m., the skidder's hydraulic line blew. It sprayed fluid all over the side of the cab, and the engine just sputtered and died. The silence that followed was heavy. It wasn't just the absence of the engine. It was like the forest itself had been holding its breath, waiting for the noise to stop. I climbed down from the cab, my boots hitting the soft, damp earth with a dull thud. The air smelled like wet pine and that sharp, metallic scent of hydraulic oil. I reached into my Carhartt jacket, pulled out a pack of Marlboro Reds, and sparked one with my Zippo. I needed to think. I had my Garmin GP SMAP 60 on my belt, but the canopy was so thick that the signal was bouncing. I figured I'd just walk the 2 miles back to the ridge where the foreman had left his Ford F-250. I started walking. The sun was dipping behind the peaks, casting long, spindly shadows across the trail. You know that feeling when you're being watched? That prickle on the back of your neck that makes your skin feel too tight? I told myself it was just the mountain creep, that psychological trick where your brain fills the silence with imaginary threats. I checked my 9mm on my hip, just a standard issue Glock 19 I carry for coyotes or the occasional stray dog. The weight of it usually makes me feel better, usually. I was about half a mile from the skidder when I heard it, a whistle. It was 3 notes, short, rising, and impossibly clear. It sounded like a man standing maybe 20 yards off to my left, just inside the brush. It was a jaunty little tune, the kind of thing you'd whistle while walking to the mailbox. I stopped dead. I called out. My voice sounded thin, swallowed up by the damp trees. No answer. I waited for about 30 seconds. Maybe it was a bird, I thought, some kind of mockingbird or a starling mimicking something it heard. I wiped the sweat from my forehead, even though the air was freezing. I started walking again, faster this time. Tweet, tweet, woo. It came from the right this time. Same 3 notes, same pitch, but closer. Now look, when you spend your life in the backcountry, you develop a bit of a cocky streak. You think you know the rules. Without even thinking, like it was a reflex, I puckered my lips and whistled the same 3 notes back. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove I wasn't scared. Maybe I wanted to see if someone would laugh and step out from behind an oak tree. The moment the last note left my mouth, the forest went dead. No crickets. No wind, no rustle of squirrels, just a silence so absolute it felt like I'd gone deaf. Then, about 10 feet behind me, something moved. It wasn't the sound of a deer leaping. It was the sound of something heavy, something that walked on 2 legs, taking a single, deliberate step into the dry leaves. Crunch. I didn't turn around right away. I couldn't. My heart was slamming against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack a bone. I reached down and unsnapped the holster on my Glock. My fingers felt like lead. When I finally turned, the trail behind me was empty. But as I looked into the shadows of the rhododendron thicket, I saw a shape. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, and thin as a rail. It was standing perfectly still behind a white pine. For a second, I thought it was just a dead stump, but then I saw the hand. It was gripping the bark. The fingers were too long, with too many knuckles, and the skin was the color of a drowned man. It wasn't hiding, it was waiting. And that's when I realized the first whistle hadn't been a greeting at all. It was a test, and I had just given it exactly what it wanted. I backed up a step, my eyes locked on that gray hand. I felt a drop of cold sweat slide down my spine. I needed to run. But every instinct told me that the moment I turned my back, those long fingers would be on my shoulder. Then, from the darkness behind the tree, the thing whistled again. But it wasn't the 3 notes anymore. It was a perfect, distorted mimicry of my own voice saying, "Hello." The tone was mine. The cadence was mine, but the vibration, it sounded like it was coming through a throat full of wet gravel. I realized then that I wasn't dealing with a person, and I definitely wasn't dealing with an animal. I was standing in the dark with something that had been waiting for a reason to come out of the holler. I gripped my Glock, but my hand was shaking so violently the slide was rattling. I knew if I stayed there, I was dead. I had to move. Now, I didn't just run. Running in the backcountry at night is a death sentence. You trip over a rotted log or catch a rogue root, and you're a sitting duck with a snapped tibia. I backed away, keeping my Glock leveled at that white pine, my boots searching the uneven ground behind me like I had eyes in my heels. Every time I blinked, the figure seemed to twitch, not like a human move, but like a glitch in a video. One second it was behind the tree, the next, its shoulder was visible on the other side. It was fluid, wrong. My brain was screaming that this was just exhaustion, that the 14-hour shift and the hydraulic fumes were making me see things. But the smell, you can't hallucinate a smell like that. It was the scent of an open grave mixed with the wet, sour fur of a dog that's been dead in a creek for a week. I reached the edge of the clearing where the old logging road started. I turned and moved into a heavy jog, my breath coming in jagged, burning stabs. The forest was still dead silent, except for the rhythmic crunch slap of my own boots. Then the whistle started again. This time it wasn't behind me, it was above me. A sharp, melodic tweet-tweet-hoo echoed from the canopy of a massive hemlock I was passing. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I looked up for a split second and saw something pale and spindly retracting into the needles. It was moving through the trees with the speed of a squirrel but the weight of a grown man. The branches didn't just sway, they groaned under its mass. I fumbled for my radio, an old Midland handheld we use for sight coordination. "Gary, you there? Gary, come in." Static, pure, biting static. But underneath the white noise I heard it, a faint, rhythmic clicking sound. Click, click, click. It sounded like teeth hitting together, or bone on bone. "Gary, if this is you playing a prank with a speaker, I'm gonna bury you in the landing. You hear me?" I yelled, my voice cracking. I was desperate for it to be Gary. I wanted Gary to jump out with a beer and a laugh more than I'd ever wanted anything in my life. But Gary didn't answer. The clicking on the radio got louder, syncing up with the pace of my heartbeat. I hit the 1-mile marker, a rusted piece of tin nailed to an oak. I was halfway to the Ford F-250. My lungs felt like they were filled with hot coal. I stopped for a second to catch my breath, leaning against a rock, my 9mm shaking in my hand. That's when I heard the voice again. It came from the darkness about 30 feet ahead of me, right in the middle of the trail. "Miller, you forgot your Marlboros!" It was my voice, my exact southern drawl, the way I round my O's, but it was flat, emotional less, like a recording being played back through a broken speaker. I raised my tactical light, a Streamlight ProTac, and clicked it to high. The beam cut through the mist, and for 3 seconds I saw it clearly. It was crouched in the middle of the road. It looked like a man who had been stretched on a rack until his skin was translucent. No hair, no clothes. Just that dull, bruised gray flesh. Its eyes weren't eyes. They were 2 pits of polished obsidian that reflected absolutely no light, and its mouth. It was too wide. It was stretched into a permanent, mocking grin that didn't reach those hollow eyes. It was holding something in its long, multi-jointed fingers. It was my crumpled pack of Reds I'd left back at the skidder. My stomach turned over. This thing had covered half a mile, retrieved my trash, and gotten ahead of me in the time it took me to jog here. It was toying with me. It was following the golden rule. I had whistled. I had acknowledged it. And now it was part of my world. "Get back!" I screamed, and I didn't wait. I leveled the Glock and fired 2 rounds. Bang, bang. The muzzle flashes blinded me for a heartbeat. When my vision cleared, the trail was empty. The pack of cigarettes was lying in the dirt, but the creature was gone. I didn't check for blood. I didn't check for tracks. I bolted. I ran with every ounce of strength left in my 40-year-old legs. I could hear it now. Not just one whistle, but dozens of them, coming from all directions in the holler. A symphony of my own whistle being thrown back at me from the ridges, the trees, and the dark hollows. Before I tell you what happened when I finally saw the headlights of the F-250, I need to remind you. These stories aren't for entertainment. They're warnings. If you're enjoying these accounts and want to stay informed on the stuff the Forest Service tries to keep under wraps, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. You don't want to be the one whistling in the dark without knowing what's listening. I saw the truck. The white paint of the foreman's Ford was like a lighthouse in the fog. I fumbled for the keys in the magnetic hide-to-key box under the wheel well, my fingers slick with sweat and dirt. I got the door open, dove inside, and slammed the lock down. I sat there for a second, gasping, the interior of the truck smelling like stale coffee and old upholstery. I felt safe. I felt like the metal cab was a fortress. I reached over to start the engine, but my hand froze. The driver's side window was fogging up from my hot breath. And there, in the condensation on the outside of the glass, a message was being traced by a long gray finger. WHESTLE. Then a slow, deliberate knock came from the roof of the truck. Thump, thump, thump. Something was perched on top of the cab, and then the radio in the dashboard, which was turned off, clicked on. The dashboard of the Ford didn't just flicker to life, it groaned. The digital display stayed black, but the speakers began to hum with a low-frequency vibration that made my molars ache. It was that same clicking sound, click, 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 but now it was layered with a wet, slurpy noise like someone pulling their boots out of deep mud. Then the roof of the truck buckled. I'm talking about heavy-gauge American steel. I watched, paralyzed, as a fist-sized dent appeared in the ceiling of the cab, right above the passenger seat. The fabric liner ripped, and a drop of something thick and black dripped onto the headrest. It didn't smell like oil. It smelled like copper and old, stagnant pond water. I finally found the ignition. I jammed the key in and turned it. The starter gave a pathetic whir-whir click. Nothing. The battery was being drained by something I couldn't see. "Come on, you piece of junk, turn over." I roared, slamming my fist against the steering wheel. Outside, the clicking stopped. The knocking on the roof stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I looked out the windshield, and my heart nearly stopped. The fog had rolled in so thick I couldn't see the hood of the truck, but something was moving in the mist, not one shape, dozens. Small, pale faces began to press against the glass. They weren't the tall thing from the trail. These were smaller, the size of children, but their proportions were all wrong. Their limbs were too long, their torsos shriveled, and they had no noses, just slits in the skin. They didn't have teeth. They had jagged, yellowed bone protruding directly from their gums. They weren't whistling anymore. They were mimicking the sound of my own heavy breathing, a chorus of a dozen panicked, wheezing breaths surrounding the truck. Thump! One of them jumped onto the hood. It stared at me through the glass, its obsidian eyes reflecting the faint green glow of the instrument cluster. It tilted its head, and then, with a slow, deliberate motion, it licked the windshield. Its tongue was black, split like a snake's, and it left a trail of dark slime on the glass that began to sizzle, eating into the safety film. I didn't think, I just reacted. I grabbed the standard issue 9mm from my lap, aimed it through the windshield at the thing on the hood, and emptied the remaining 10 rounds in the magazine. Bang, 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 bang. The glass shattered, but it didn't fall out. It spiderwebbed into a white, opaque sheet. The thing on the hood vanished into the mist, letting out a screech that sounded like metal being torn apart. In that split second of chaos, the truck's engine suddenly roared to life. The electronics surged, the headlights cut through the fog like twin sabers, and I saw them. There were at least 20 of those pale, shriveled things standing in the road, and behind them, towering over the group, was the tall one. It was standing perfectly still, its long arms hanging down past its knees. It wasn't attacking. It was just watching, its wide, frozen grin illuminated by the high beams. I slammed the truck into 4 low, floored the gas, and felt the tires chattering against the gravel. I didn't care what I hit. I felt the sickening thud-thud as the heavy Ford rolled over something soft in the road. I didn't look back. I drove that truck like a madman, fishtailing around the narrow switchbacks, the engine screaming at 5,000 RPMs. I hit the main paved road doing 70, my hands locked onto the steering wheel so tight I thought I'd snap the plastic. I didn't stop until I reached the Shell station in town, under the bright, buzzing fluorescent lights. I jumped out of the truck, gasping for air, looking for the foreman, looking for anyone. The gas station attendant, an old guy named Arlo who'd lived there since the 50s, walked out when he saw the state of the truck, the shattered windshield, the dents, the black slime. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask what happened. He looked at the truck, then he looked at me, and he saw the way my lips were still trembling. "You whistled back, didn't you, Miller?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. I couldn't even nod. I just leaned against the gas pump and puked. Arlo walked over, put a heavy hand on my shoulder, and looked up toward the dark silhouette of the mountains. They don't forget a voice, son. Once you give them yours, they keep a piece of it. You might have driven out of the holler, but you didn't leave alone. He stayed at a motel that night. I didn't go home. I couldn't face my wife, not with that smell still clinging to my skin. I sat on the edge of the bed, the Glock on the nightstand, watching the door. Around 3000 am, the room went cold, the kind of cold that settles in your marrow. I sat up, my skin crawling. The motel room was silent. Then, from the bathroom behind the closed door, I heard it. The shower curtain ring slid across the metal rod. Zip. And then, a soft melodic whistle. 3 notes, rising, tweet tweet. Who? I don't work the timber anymore. I moved to the coast, 300 miles away from the nearest mountain. But sometimes, when the house is quiet and the wind dies down, I hear a faint clicking in the vents. And I know they're still practicing my voice. If you're ever in the Appalachians and the woods go quiet, do yourself a favor. Don't be polite, don't be curious, and for the love of God, keep your mouth shut.